Napoleon.
That was better than a Death Row tour he did, man. Basically, I'll step up because my voice might not be loud enough. I'm basically here to give you guys a background of my life. The brother, he kind of touched up on it. I was born in Newark, New Jersey, to an African-American father, a Puerto Rican and Cuban mother. At the age of 3, like the brother said, I witnessed both of my parents get murdered in front of me. It wasn't my uncle, thank God. It was a friend of the family who happened to be my so-called godfather back in the day. And I was in the house with my 6-month-old brother, and I had a 4-year-old brother in the house at the time. After the killing of my mother and father, me and my brothers, we moved to the house with our grandparents, and they happened to be nice enough to open their doors, take us in the house, and raise us. The house of my grandparents was a very crowded house where we had other aunties, uncles, little cousins, a bunch of us in one house. So for me and my brothers, we never liked to stay in the house. We always liked to hang on the corner. We always liked to hang in the streets. And eventually, with too much idle time on our hand, we got ourselves in trouble. I remember at a very young age, my brothers and cousins, they got into selling cocaine. And the first day that I went on the block with my brothers and cousins to sell drugs, I got arrested. They called my grandparents. They came and picked me up out of the prison, from out of jail. They took me home, and of course I got in trouble. But right there, I told myself that I need to find another way to make a hustle, another way to make some money. At this time, I was around 13, 14 years old. One of the things that I turned into doing is turn to writing raps. Whatever I would see outside on my block, I would go into the room and I would write it down into a song. So if I see gunfights, drug dealings, whatever, I would go make a song out of it. I would come back on the block and I would rap it into the drug dealers. And this is how I was making some money. I also had a childhood friend by the name of Yafeyo that every year his mother would come pick me up, take me from my neighborhood, bring me to his neighborhood, and we would kick it like that. Every single year I would look forward to getting together with Yafeyo and his mother. But years went past and I lost contact with Yafeyo, and I happened to run into his mother, and I asked his mother how was he doing, and she told me that Yafeyo no longer lived in New Jersey, and he's trying to pursue a career in the music industry, and he lived with his brother by the name of Tupac Shakur. How many of y'all heard of Tupac? Huh? Who is he? I'll tell you later. So Tupac, at this time, was a well-known rapper. He already sold millions of records, but he was also a controversial figure. He was always in and out of jail. He was always on the news. So when I found out that Yafeyo was the half-brother of Tupac Shakur, I was amazed because I never knew that this was his brother. And the people in my neighborhood, we respected Tupac because not only did we thought he was a gangster rapper, we thought that he actually did the stuff that he rapped about. For example, it was a time that 2 off-duty police got shot by Tupac Shakur. He went to jail, he went to court, he beat the case, etc. So when she told me that Yafeyo and Tupac was on their way to New York City, she said, why don't you go to New York City to meet them? The part of New Jersey I was from was basically 30 minutes away from New York on the train. So I was able to hop on the train, go to New York City, and get acquainted with an old friend, Yafeyo, and also introduce and meet Tupac Shakur. The first time that I met Pop, I was surprised because I thought Tupac was going to come into the hotel room and he was going to be basically thugged out. He was going to basically bring a party with him. But when Tupac walked into the room, he was the opposite of what I expected from him. He was very calm, he was soft-spoken, and he came in here with a laid-back demeanor. And the first thing that Tupac said is, I heard that you witnessed your mother and father get murdered in front of you. Can you tell me some of that story? When I started to tell Tupac the story, believe it or not, he started to cry. For me, this was surprising because he was a guy that rapped this type of stuff in his music, and nobody never reacted over the death of my parents the way Tupac did. Tupac said that he wanted to put a rap group together, and he said that he wanted me to be part of this rap group. A few months later, I flew to Atlanta, Georgia, to the house of Tupac, and one day we happened to be in the living room of Tupac, and he was saying that I want to put this rap group together, but I want this group to be different than all the other rap groups. In fact, he said, I want to give you guys names of so-called enemies of the West or so-called tyrants. So one by one, he started to name us, for example, Yafeyo. Tupac gave him the name Gaddafi after the Libyan president, Muammar Gaddafi. Another member of the Outlawz, Tupac gave him the name Idi Amin after the Ugandan president Idi Amin. Another member of the Outlawz, Tupac named him Hussein after Saddam Hussein. Another member, Tupac gave him the name Castro after the Cuban president Fidel Castro. When I was young, I had a very bad temper, to the point that my black side of the family, they always blamed it on my Puerto Rican and my Cuban side of the family. Every time me and my brothers get upset or have a temper, or we display our temper, my grandparents and my aunts would say, "You just like your mother, you just like your crazy Cuban mother, your crazy Puerto Rican mother, etc." So when I met Tupac, I had that same attitude as if I was mad at the world, as if I had a chip on my shoulder. So Tupac said that I had the short man complex because of my height. In other words, this is called the Napoleonic complex after the French Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte. So that's how I got the name Napoleon. The first record that I ever performed on sold 3 million records worldwide. So for me, this was a huge accomplishment. When Tupac put this record out, he happened to go to New York City because, like I said, he was always in and out of court case. And he happened to one day while he was in New York City, he happened to be going into an elevator. 2 gunmen followed him in the elevator. They pulled out pistols. They opened fire on Tupac and they shot him 5 times. He got shot twice in the head. Do anybody remember this incident? Yeah. The people that tried to murder Tupac, most people thought that it was a robbery, but actually it was a hit out on the life of Tupac. Tupac had some run-ins with a gangster from New York City. They had some words, they fell out, and this gangster decided to put a hit out on Tupac. Tupac eventually, as we all know, he didn't die from the shooting, but a few months later, he got arrested, and he did a 1.5 years in prison. While Tupac was in prison, he had $1 million bond. 2 people came to help him out, to bail him out. The first person that offered to bail Tupac out was a lady named Madonna. How many of you guys know Madonna? How do the Muslim men know Madonna? Madonna was one of the persons that asked to bail Tupac out. Another person that offered to bail Tupac out was a guy named Suge Knight. How many of y'all heard of Suge Knight? Suge Knight, for those that don't know Suge Knight, he was a guy who started a record company called Death Row Records out of Compton, California. The first artist that Suge Knight put out was a rap artist named Snoop Dogg, and then Dr. Dre. So he had a successful record company at this time. He approached Tupac, put up the $1 million bail. Tupac, myself, and the rest of the Outlawz, we moved to Los Angeles, California. When I went to Los Angeles, California, Tupac decided to do a record. He put this record out called All Eyes on Me. To this day, it sold 20 million records worldwide. Myself, along with the Outlawz, we performed on about 8 or 9 songs on this record. Anybody that's familiar with Tupac, they will remember before he went to Death Row Records, he always spoke about death, correct? He had songs where he used to talk about how he wanted to kill his own, he wanted to take his own life. He was very suicidal, and it was times that me and the Outlawz would be in the living room with Tupac, and he would say them same words. He would get upset, and sometimes he would say he don't want to live anymore. But when he got to Death Row Records, he started to make a lot of money. I remember we was in his living room, and I remember this conversation like yesterday. We was having a conversation with Tupac, and he said, "Remember I told you guys how I don't want to live anymore, how I want to die?" He said, "But for some reason, I want to live forever. For some reason, I want to continue to live." He said, "Now that I have this house," he just bought him a house on the beach. He said, "Now that I just bought this Rolls Royce," he bought him a Rolls Royce, a convertible Rolls Royce, and he had a lot of money in his bank account from signing to Death Row Records. He said, "I want to continue to live, to enjoy my life." Unfortunately, a couple months later, Tupac died in Las Vegas. It was a drive-by shooting. A car pulled up on the side of him and Suge Knight, and Tupac got shot 13 times. Now for me, this was a wake-up call, because the way that I lived my life, like the brother was saying, is that when the people killed my mother and father, they was from a group called the Nation of Islam. So I grew up hating the religion of Islam, or what nothing to do with the religion of Islam, and I was raised as a Christian. My grandparents used to force me and my brothers to go to church. But at a very young age, I felt that the religion of Christianity, this is not the proper way to teach me how to worship my Lord. So I said, I have no religion, I just believe in God. But even though I had no religion, I've never been a believer that a person can live life the way they want to live life, do whatever they want to do. When they drop dead, they go to their grave, they go to sleep, and that's it. So when Tupac died, I was always curious about what's happening to Tupac while he in his grave. So after the death of Tupac, me and the rest of the Outlawz, we continued to do music. Me, myself, with Gaddafi went to New Jersey, and I decided to leave New Jersey. I told Gaddafi, you should leave New Jersey. Let's pursue our career in the music industry. At this time, my group, along with Gaddafi. We was already on records that sold 25 million records worldwide. So I said there's no need to